The sun hung low over the Arizona sky, a blazing disk of fire sinking into the horizon. The wind rolled across the red earth in sighing waves, carrying with it the dry scent of dust and creosote. Evelyn Hart gripped the reins tighter as her wagon jolted over another rut in the trail. Sweat dampened her bonnet and her throat ached with thirst. But she didn't stop. She'd come too far to turn back now. The year was 1883, and Evelyn, daughter of Reverend Nathaniel Hart of St. Louis, had accepted a post as a teacher and missionary in a remote frontier settlement. It was supposed to be God's calling, a chance to bring light and learning to children who had none. But now, stranded in the desert, she wondered if it was judgment instead. Her guide and driver had fled hours ago when the sound of distant gunfire echoed through the hills. Bandits or Apache raiders, he'd muttered before he spurred his horse and vanished. That left Evelyn alone with 2 oxen, a half-empty water barrel, and a heart that trembled with both fear and stubborn faith. By dusk, the oxen gave up. One stumbled and fell, the other lowed miserably. Evelyn climbed down, her boots sinking into the sand. Her lips were cracked, her skin burned, and the world shimmered in a cruel mirage of heat. When the wind rose again, it carried a sound, a whisper of hoofbeats. Her heart leapt. She turned, hand trembling as she reached for the small pistol in her satchel. Out from behind a cluster of rocks rode a man on a painted horse, his dark hair loose in the wind, his skin bronze as the canyon walls, an Apache. He wore fringed leather, and his eyes were black as obsidian. He stopped a few paces away, silent and still as a statue. Evelyn's breath caught. The stories she'd heard in St. Louis came flooding back. Stories of raids, of savage men who took what they wanted. "Stay back," she stammered, pointing the pistol though her hand shook. The man tilted his head, studying her, not like a predator but like someone who'd found something unexpected. Then slowly he raised his hand, palm outward, a gesture of peace. "You are lost," he said in careful English. His voice was low, steady, carrying the calm of stone and water. I don't need help," she lied. Her vision wavered. He dismounted and stepped closer. Evelyn tried to lift the pistol again, but her strength failed her. The world spun, the heat roaring in her ears. The last thing she saw before she collapsed was the stranger's face above her. Calm, unreadable, and haloed by the desert sun. When she woke, night had fallen. The stars were so many they seemed to spill from heaven itself. A fire crackled nearby, and beside it sat the Apache watching her. Her coat had been draped over her like a blanket, and a small flask of water rested beside her hand. Evelyn's throat burned as she drank. The man didn't speak. After a while, she found her voice. "Why did you help me?" He looked into the fire. "Because you would have died, is that all?" He turned his gaze to her. Deep, calm eyes that caught the firelight like polished stone. "Life is sacred, even when it belongs to one who fears me." His words struck her. "I don't fear you," she lied again. He smiled faintly. "Then you are braver than most." There was silence for a while, broken only by the crackle of fire and the far-off cry of a coyote. Evelyn studied him, the way he sat, straight-backed but relaxed, as though he were part of the earth itself. His presence unsettled her, yet there was something safe in it too. "Who are you?" she asked softly. "Kohana," he said, "son of the Eagle clan. I'm Evelyn Hart." She hesitated, then added, "A school teacher." He nodded, though she wasn't sure he understood. When she looked at the stars again, they seemed nearer somehow. The desert wasn't just empty anymore, it was alive, breathing. The next morning he helped her repair the wagon and led her to a spring hidden between 2 cliffs. The water was cold and sweet, and she nearly wept as she drank. Kohana filled her canteen without a word. "Why are you out here alone?" she asked as they rested by the spring. "My people move with the season," he said. "The soldiers chase us. We hide where the earth hides us. Then, why risk helping a stranger?" He looked out toward the horizon. "Because once a stranger helped my sister. A white woman. Not all who come from your towns are cruel." Evelyn felt her heart soften. She had been raised to see the Apache as heathens, people to be converted or feared. But sitting beside this quiet man, she felt something different. His dignity, his calm, his strength. They made her question everything she thought she knew. When she thanked him for saving her life, he only said, "You will walk again. The sun is strong, but you are stronger." That night, a storm rolled across the desert. Thunder cracked over the mesas and lightning tore the sky into white ribbons. Kohana built a shelter of hides and brush, and Evelyn huddled beneath it, shivering as the rain lashed the ground. When the thunder grew close, she flinched. Kohana reached over, gently covering her hands with his own. His palms were warm, steady. "Do not fear the storm," he said softly. "It is only the sky remembering its power." His voice calmed her more than she expected. She met his eyes, and for a heartbeat the world outside vanished. There was only him, the fire between them, and the deep pull of something unnamed. When the storm passed, they sat in silence. The rain had washed the air clean, and the desert smelled of sage. Evelyn felt something new stirring in her chest, something fragile, dangerous, and beautiful. She wasn't sure what it was yet, only that it had started the moment he looked at her and didn't see an enemy, but a woman. The next morning, as dawn painted the cliffs in gold, Kohana saddled his horse. "You should come," he said. "My village is 2 days' ride." "You will be safe," Evelyn hesitated. Going with him meant leaving everything she knew, the mission, her plan, the safety of her own kind. But staying here meant dying alone, and something deeper whispered to her, that safety wasn't always where one expected to find it. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll go." Kohana nodded once. He offered his hand, and when she placed hers in his, she felt the roughness of calloused skin and a warmth that spread through her chest like the sunrise. They rode out across the open desert, two souls from different worlds, the trail stretching before them like an unspoken promise. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a sea of gold and rust where the wind whispered secrets through the sagebrush. For 2 long days, Evelyn and Kohana rode in silence, the rhythm of the horse's hooves beating steady against the earth. At first, she had been too shy to speak much. Every time she turned her head, she caught glimpses of him. His long, dark hair tied loosely with a strip of leather, the strength in his shoulders as he rode, the stillness in his gaze. He seemed born of this land, a part of the sky and the dust, while she still felt like a stranger to both. On the second evening, the hills opened into a valley, a beautiful, hidden cradle of green threaded with a stream. The Apache village rested there, half hidden among cottonwoods and boulders. Smoke from small fires curled into the sky, carrying the smell of cedar and cooked maize. As they entered, a few heads turned. Children ran to see the new arrival, their laughter like birdsong. Women paused in their chores, their eyes cautious but not unkind. Evelyn's heart pounded. She was the only white woman here, dressed in worn traveling clothes and clutching her satchel like a shield. An older man with silver hair and sharp eyes approached them. Kohana dismounted and bowed his head. "This is White Elk," he said softly to Evelyn. "He is our elder." White Elk studied her, his gaze neither hostile nor welcoming, simply measuring. Then he spoke in his own tongue, and Kohana translated. "He says the desert brought you here for a reason. You will stay until you are strong." Evelyn nodded gratefully. "Please thank him." Kohana translated her words, and White Elk's expression softened. The old man touched 2 fingers to his brow and then to his chest, a gesture of peace. Evelyn followed Kohana to a small hut made of timber and hides. Inside it was simple but warm, with a mat of woven reeds and a small clay pot for water. She set her bag down and exhaled deeply. Outside, the sounds of the village drifted through, the distant rhythm of drums, the chatter of children, the soft neighing of horses. For the first time since she'd left St. Louis, she felt safe. Over the next weeks, she grew to know the rhythm of the Apache life. She helped the women gather herbs and learned how to grind corn into meal. She laughed with the children as they showed her how to paint their faces with red dust before festivals. Her awkwardness faded as she began to understand their kindness, the quiet dignity with which they lived, their closeness to the earth, and always, there was Kohana. He was a constant, like the mountains surrounding the valley. He taught her to ride bareback, to listen to the sound of the wind to know when a storm was coming. His English was limited, but their silences spoke volumes. Sometimes he would simply watch her as she worked, his eyes gentle but unreadable. Once, when she stumbled while carrying a heavy water pot, he caught her before she fell. His hand steadied her waist, strong and warm. Their eyes met, and for a breathless second, neither moved. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken, her breath catch. He released her almost immediately, as if afraid to cross some invisible line. Later that night, she sat outside her hut, watching the fireflies dance above the stream. Kohana joined her, sitting a respectful distance away. "You are learning fast," he said quietly. "I'm trying," she replied. "Your people. They've been kind," he nodded. "You have a gentle heart. The children see it. The women see it too. And you?" she asked softly before she could stop herself. He looked into the fire. "I see it most of all." Her cheeks warmed and she turned her face away. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was full of something unspoken, like a melody waiting for words. One afternoon, a young girl named Suna, no more than 8, grew suddenly ill with fever. The women panicked. Their medicines weren't working. Evelyn remembered some basic remedies her mother had taught her: cooling cloths, willow bark tea, small doses of quinine. Kohana rode out with her to the nearby river to gather herbs. When they returned, she stayed by Suna's side all night, changing the wet cloths on her forehead, whispering prayers. Kohana stayed at the door, silent as a shadow. By dawn, the child's fever broke. Her breathing steadied and the color returned to her cheeks. The women cried with relief and hugged Evelyn. Kohana watched from a distance, pride softening his usual reserve. When she approached him later, weary but smiling, he said simply, "You have done what our healer could not. You carry a spirit of light." Evelyn felt her heart flutter at his words. "I only did what anyone would." He shook his head. "Not anyone. Some hearts are born forgiving. Yours is such a heart." His words stayed with her for days. As summer deepened, she began to see the world differently. The harsh desert that had once frightened her now felt alive. She loved the whisper of wind through the canyon, the bright songs of the morning birds, the glow of the fires under the starlit sky. And she loved, though she dared not name it, the quiet moments beside Kohana when no words were needed. One evening, she joined the tribe's celebration of the harvest moon. The air shimmered with the rhythm of drums and the laughter of children. Evelyn sat near the fire, watching as the dancers moved in graceful circles. Kohana was among them, his body strong and fluid, his movements fierce and beautiful. When the dance ended, he came to her. "You watch but do not join," he said. "I don't know how," she confessed, smiling shyly. "Then I will show you." He took her hand gently and led her into the circle. The tribe clapped and laughed as she tried to follow his steps. Her laughter mingled with theirs, her hair falling loose from its pins. Kohana's hands guided hers, his gaze never leaving her face. When the music slowed, they stood close, breath mingling in the warm night air. The drums faded, and for a moment the world fell silent. Then Kohana stepped back. "You dance well," he said softly. She smiled. "Only because I had a good teacher." Their eyes met again and something unspoken passed between them, a feeling too deep for words. Days passed, and Evelyn began to realize that her heart had changed. The loneliness she'd carried since leaving home was gone, replaced by something stronger: hope. She belonged here in a way she hadn't thought possible. One morning she caught Kohana at the stream, kneeling as he sharpened his blade. She watched him, sunlight glinting off his hair, the muscles in his arms moving with quiet grace. When he noticed her, she blushed and turned away, embarrassed. He rose and approached her. "You stare like one who seeks an answer," he said. She smiled nervously. "Maybe I'm only trying to understand what brought me here." "Perhaps the wind knows," he said. "It carries those who listen. And you think I was brought here? By the wind?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "By something stronger." Their eyes met again, and this time she didn't look away. The silence between them pulsed with meaning. That night, Evelyn wrote in her small journal by the firelight, "The Apache are not what the world says they are. They are proud, kind, and wise. Kohana is different from any man I've known. When he looks at me, I feel seen, not for what I should be, but for what I am." Outside, the wind carried the sound of drums again, and though she didn't join them this time, her heart beat with their rhythm, because she knew deep down something was changing inside her. Trust had taken root where fear once lived, and from that trust, love had quietly begun to bloom. The days grew shorter, and the air carried a faint chill that whispered of autumn. The desert's colors softened, golds deepened into amber, the sky blushed crimson at dusk, and the nights came alive with the scent of sage and wood smoke. Evelyn had now lived among the Apache for nearly 3 months. Each sunrise brought her closer to the life she never imagined she could have. One of simplicity, quiet work and peace that came not from walls or churches, but from the open sky above her. And through it all, Kohana remained at the center of that peace. He was still the same, calm, composed, a man of few words, yet she sensed that he, too, felt the pull of something growing between them. Sometimes she caught his gaze lingering when he thought she wasn't looking. Sometimes his silence around her was heavier than words. One evening, as the harvest moon rose over the valley, the tribe gathered for a night of song and gratitude. The drums beat like steady heartbeats echoing off the cliffs, and the fire painted the dancers in shades of gold and scarlet. Evelyn stood apart for a while, watching the faces illuminated by the flames. Laughter rose into the air, mingling with the crackle of firewood. Yet her heart felt strangely full, not lonely but aware. She was surrounded by people, yet her thoughts were only of one man. Kohana stood across the fire, speaking quietly with White Elk. His profile was cut sharp against the glow, noble, sure, and strong. When his eyes finally found hers through the drifting smoke, the world seemed to pause. He crossed the circle to her, the drums fading as though the night itself held its breath. "Come," he said gently. "The fire grows loud. The canyon will be quieter." She nodded, and together they walked away from the crowd, climbing the rocky path that wound behind the village. The sounds of music softened into distant echoes until only the hum of the desert wind remained. They reached a small clearing where the moon hung large and low, bathing the earth in silver light. Below them, the world stretched out endlessly, valleys, canyons, and stars that seemed close enough to touch. Evelyn wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The air was cool, but her heart beat warm and fast. Kohana looked at her quietly for a long time. "You do not fear this place anymore," he said finally. She smiled faintly. "No, I used to see only danger here. Now I see beauty," he nodded. "The desert changes those who listen. It tests the spirit." She turned to him. "And what has it taught you?" He paused before answering. "That strength is not in fighting. It is in protecting." In patience, his voice softened. "And in knowing when to open the heart?" Something in his tone made her look up. The moonlight caught his eyes, dark, steady, filled with something unspoken. Evelyn's throat tightened. "Kohana," she began, then hesitated. He waited, silent, giving her space as he always did. "There's something I should tell you," she said quietly. "Something I've never told anyone." He inclined his head. "Speak your truth." She looked down, her hands clasped together. "Back home, I was raised to be proper, careful, obedient. My father used to say that love was something to fear, that it made people weak. So I built walls instead. I told myself I'd never let anyone close." Her voice trembled slightly. "And so I never have. I've never given my heart to anyone." Kohana studied her face, understanding in his gaze. "Your heart has waited," he said gently. "Yes," she whispered. "And it frightens me, because when I'm with you I feel it waking. I feel everything I thought I was safe from." The words hung in the air between them, fragile as glass. Evelyn expected him to speak, but he didn't. Instead, he stepped closer, so near she could feel the warmth of his breath mingling with the cool night air. "The moon sees truth," he said softly, "and tonight it sees your heart. It does not judge." She met his eyes, and the strength in them steadied her trembling. "I don't understand how it's possible," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "You come from a world so different from mine. Yet when I look at you, I feel safe, as if I've known you long before this life." Kohana's eyes softened, the faintest smile curving his lips. "My people believe that spirits meet many times before they are born as flesh. Perhaps you and I have walked together before, in another sky, another age." The thought filled her with warmth. "Then perhaps that's why I'm not afraid anymore." He reached up and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch was light, reverent, not claiming, but cherishing. "When the wind first brought you to me," he said, "I did not understand why. But I knew the earth does not make mistakes. You were meant to be here, to heal, and to remind me that peace is still possible." Evelyn blinked back tears. The words weren't grand or poetic, yet they touched a place deeper than any sermon ever had. They stood there for a long moment, two souls beneath the vast western moon, silent, but speaking in the language of the heart. Kohana finally said, "The night is cold, sit." He laid his blanket on the ground and sat beside her. They watched the stars in companionable silence, their shoulders barely touching. The desert around them was quiet, save for the distant song of a night bird and the sigh of the wind through the cliffs. Evelyn felt a peace she had never known before, a peace that came not from safety but from surrendering her fear. Kohana's voice broke the silence, low and steady. In my tongue, there is no word for possession, only belonging. The river belongs to the land, the hawk belongs to the sky, the heart belongs to the one it trusts. She turned to him. And who does your heart belong to? He looked into her eyes, and the answer was already there, unspoken but clear as the stars above. To the one who was brave enough to trust me, he said quietly. Evelyn smiled, her tears glimmering in the moonlight. Then tonight will be special, she whispered. He nodded slowly. Yes, special, because the heart has found its home. And under that wide silver sky, with no vows and no witnesses, they simply sat together, hand in hand, spirit to spirit, two hearts finally at rest. That night, no promise was spoken aloud, yet something sacred was sealed, not in passion but in peace, not in fire but in faith. The moon drifted higher, the stars shimmered like blessings, and the desert, vast, eternal, watching, bore silent witness to the kind of love that outlasts both time and fear. Autumn slid quietly into the canyons. Days burned gold, nights cooled beneath a silver sky. Evelyn's life among the Apache had settled into a steady rhythm. Morning work, lessons for the children, evenings shared around the fire. The people had grown used to her gentle voice and her clumsy but earnest words in their tongue. Yet peace in the frontier was always fragile. Rumors traveled faster than the wind. Soldiers from the nearest fort had heard tales of a white woman living among the Apaches. To the army, that meant scandal, shame, or worse, hostage. They decided they would rescue her, whether she wished it or not. Evelyn knew nothing of this when she awoke one dawn to the smell of wood smoke and the sound of drums. The tribe was preparing to move their camp deeper into the mountains before winter. Kohana worked beside his men, calm and certain, but she sensed tension in the air, the stillness that comes before a storm. White Elk pulled her aside. Our scouts have seen riders to the east, he said gravely through Kohana's translation. Blue coats, soldiers. Her stomach tightened. They think I'm being held here. Kohana's eyes darkened. They will not listen to words. They will see only what they want. Evelyn's first thought was of the children, of the families who had welcomed her with laughter and kindness. What will they do? Fight if they must, Kohana said, his voice low. But we will try to move before the soldiers find us. By afternoon, the wind turned rough and carried dust across the valley. Kohana led her to the horses. You must ride with the women, he told her. If battle comes, stay away from it. No, she said quickly, fear and stubbornness rising together. If danger comes, I'll stay with you. He shook his head. You belong to peace, Evelyn. Not to war. She met his eyes steady. And you think peace is found by running from those who don't understand? I can speak to them. Let me try. For a long moment he said nothing, the conflict plain on his face. Finally he whispered, If you try, I will stand beside you. The next morning broke sharp and cold. From the ridge they could see dust plumes far off, riders approaching fast. The soldiers came with rifles gleaming, their leader waving a white flag but keeping his men ready. Evelyn rode forward with Kohana. Her hands trembled around the reins, yet her voice held firm. I'm not a prisoner, she called when they were close enough to hear. I'm here of my own choice. The captain, a stern man with sunburned skin, frowned. Ma'am, you've been misled. These people, though, they saved my life, she interrupted. And they've shown me more honor than many who call themselves civilized. The soldiers muttered among themselves. The captain dismounted and stepped closer. You don't know what you're saying. Come with us and we'll see you safe at the mission. Behind her, Kohana's men shifted uneasily. Tension hung thick as heat. Evelyn's voice rose. If you attack, you'll spill innocent blood. For an instant, the world held still, then a gun cracked. No one knew who fired first, but the line of soldiers erupted in noise and smoke. Horses screamed, men shouted, and chaos swept the valley. Kohana grabbed her arm. Ride! She hesitated only long enough to see the first wave of dust and panic sweep through the camp. He pulled her into the saddle and spurred his horse toward the cliffs. Bullets hissed through the air like hornets. One struck a rock beside them, sending shards flying. They reached a narrow canyon where the noise of battle dimmed to echoes. Kohana's horse stumbled. He cursed softly and dismounted, clutching his arm. Blood darkened the leather of his sleeve. "You're hurt," Evelyn cried. "It's nothing," he said through gritted teeth. "We must keep moving." But she slid from the saddle and tore a strip from her shawl, pressing it to the wound. "You saved me once," she said firmly. "Now it's my turn." He looked down at her, pride and pain warring in his eyes. "You should not have to see this," he whispered. "I'll see whatever I must," she answered. For hours they hid among the rocks while the sun climbed high. The sound of battle faded into the distance, replaced by the harsh stillness of noon. When it was safe, Evelyn helped him to a small cave where water trickled from the wall. She cleaned the wound with trembling hands, praying under her breath. "You were brave today," he murmured when she finished bandaging him. "I was terrified," she admitted. "But I couldn't lose you," he smiled faintly. "The hawk fears the wind, yet it flies." She looked at him then, really looked, and felt the truth of everything that had brought her here. All her old fears, all her doubts had been stripped away by the desert, by the kindness of these people, by him. Outside, the smoke from burning wagons smeared the horizon. Evelyn's heart ached for the families who'd fled into the hills, for the endless misunderstanding between two worlds. "Kohana," she said softly, "will this ever end? The fighting, the running?" He shook his head. "The world changes slowly, but one day those who hate will grow weary, and those who love will remain." She reached for his hand. "Then we'll keep loving, won't we?" He turned his palm upward, fingers closing around hers. "Until the mountains forget their names," he said. By dusk, the sound of gunfire had ceased completely. Smoke curled up from the valley where the soldiers had camped, and the tribe, scattered but alive, began to gather again. When Evelyn and Kohana returned, the people greeted them with quiet relief. White Elk met them at the edge of the camp. He laid a hand on Evelyn's shoulder and said, "The spirits shielded you both. You have the courage of two hearts." That night the survivors built a small fire among the rocks. The sky above them stretched vast and clear, as if all the stars had come to bear witness. Kohana sat beside Evelyn, his wounded arm resting in a sling. "You stood between two worlds today," he told her, "and neither broke you." "I only did what love demanded," she replied. He smiled then, weary but full of pride. "Love is the only thing stronger than war." She leaned her head against his shoulder, listening to the slow, steady beat of his heart. Around them the children whispered, the fire crackled, and the wind carried away the last scent of smoke. The storm had come and gone, but something unshakable remained. The bond forged in fear and faith, tested by fire and sealed with courage. Winter came softly that year, wrapping the desert in a veil of quiet. The battles were over, at least for now, and the tribe had found refuge in a hidden valley sheltered by tall pines and red cliffs. Snow lay on the ridges like white fire, and the river below sang with a clear, cold voice. Evelyn often rose before dawn to fetch water. She liked to stand by the riverbank and watch the world awaken, the light creeping over the mountains, the smoke rising from early fires, and the hawks gliding soundlessly above. Sometimes she could almost forget the pain of what had passed. Kohana's wound had healed, leaving only a thin scar across his arm. Yet he carried another scar, one no eye could see, the loss of his people's peace, the burden of leading them through endless trials. Still, whenever he looked at Evelyn, the hardness in his face softened. She had become part of the tribe not by blood but by heart. The women called her White Dawn for her fair hair and quiet courage. She taught the children songs from her homeland, while they taught her the words of their prayers. Her voice, once trembling and uncertain, now carried strength born from the desert wind itself. One evening, as the sky burned with sunset, Kohana led her up a rocky path that wound along the cliffs. He said nothing, only held her hand and walked until they reached a high ridge overlooking the valley. Below them the campfires flickered like stars fallen to earth. "I brought you here once before," he said quietly. "When you were lost and afraid." Evelyn nodded. "I remember. I thought you were going to leave me then." He smiled a little sadly. "The spirits would never let me leave what they sent me to find." She turned to look at him, the wind lifting strands of her hair. "And what did they send you to find, Kohana?" He reached out, brushing her cheek with roughened fingers. The part of me that still believed in peace. Her throat tightened. You make it sound as though I healed you. Perhaps you did, he murmured. You gave me something no weapon, no victory ever could. Hope. They stood together in silence, the world vast and endless around them. Far to the west, the sun sank behind the mountains, leaving streaks of crimson and gold. It felt as though time itself had paused to listen to their hearts. Days passed into weeks. Life in the valley settled into rhythm once again. Yet Evelyn knew something restless stirred in Kohana. Sometimes at night she'd find him standing alone at the edge of camp, watching the horizon as if waiting for a sign. One such night, she joined him. You're thinking of leaving, she said softly. He didn't deny it. There are others beyond the river, families who fled after the soldiers came. They need help, food, guidance. White Elk grows old and soon the tribe will look to me to lead. Evelyn's heart clenched. And you want me to stay behind? Kohana looked at her, his eyes shadowed with pain. If I could, I would take you everywhere the wind blows. But this life is hard and the path I walk is full of danger. You deserve peace, a place where your heart can rest. She stepped closer, her voice steady, though tears burned her eyes. My heart already has a place. It's with you, wherever that is. For a moment, he could only stare at her as if the words were too much to bear. Then he reached for her hand, pressing it to his chest. The world may try to keep us apart, he said. But love does not belong to the world, it belongs to the spirit. When spring returned, they rode together down the valley to find the scattered families. The journey was long, marked by hunger, cold nights, and the sound of coyotes crying across the plains. Yet through it all, they held on to each other. In every settlement they reached, Evelyn nursed the sick, mended clothes, taught children letters. The Apache mothers would whisper among themselves about the pale woman who carried the spirit of the land in her eyes. One evening, after a long day of travel, they camped beside a wide stretch of river. The stars were so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Kohana sat beside the fire, carving an eagle feather into a pendant. He handed it to her when he finished. For you, he said simply. An Apache promise. She turned it over in her hands, tracing the tiny symbols carved into the wood. What does it mean? It means, he said softly, that wherever the wind carries me, I will always find my way back to you. Evelyn felt tears fill her eyes. Then I'll wear it always. He smiled and brushed a kiss against her forehead. You are my dawn, he whispered. Years passed as quietly as snow melting into river water. The world changed. The soldiers left, the wars dwindled. Towns rose along the railroads, but deep in the mountains a small village thrived, where Apache children grew strong and laughter once again echoed through the canyons. Evelyn grew older, her hair silvered by time, her face lined with stories of sun and wind, yet her eyes remained bright, alive with the same fire that had carried her across the desert so long ago. Kohana's hair too had grayed, but his spirit was as fierce and gentle as ever. Each evening they would walk together to the ridge where they had once stood at sunset. From there they could see the endless horizon stretching west, and beyond it, the memory of every trial they had faced. Once Evelyn asked him, Do you ever wish things had been easier for us? Kohana looked out at the valley, the sky painted with gold. No, he said after a long pause. Easy paths do not carve strong hearts. The storm made us who we are. She smiled, leaning into him. Then I'm glad we found our storm. He laughed softly. And I'm glad we survived it. One final spring evening, as the sun dipped low and the desert wind whispered like a hymn, they sat together beneath the same stars that had once guided them. Kohana's hand found hers warm and steady. Do you remember? He asked. The first night we met? She nodded, eyes shining. You carried me through the desert. I was afraid you'd vanish by morning. I almost did, he admitted. But something told me to stay. What was it? She asked. He smiled, the same smile that had long ago melted her fear. Love, he said simply. It's the only thing that never fades. And as the last light of day slipped behind the mountains, they sat side by side, two souls who had defied the odds of a wild, unforgiving land, watching the eternal horizon where the sun would rise again, just as it always had, just as their love always would.